Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, how to help humanity with your grocery shopping with Fair Trade founder Paul Rice. So I find people like us who are seeking to evolve personally greatly desire to contribute to humanity. The people in need, however, are endless, and there are global plights that we feel pretty impotent to have any impact on. So what I've come to learn is how much good we can do with our simple grocery store purchases. So this is not an ad. It's just my normal curiosity as I seek to evolve myself and mature in my own impact on the world. So Paul Rice, he founded Fair Trade, and he just came out with a book about it. So I've known vaguely about this, fair trade stamp you see on foods here and there and other products, but I didn't really realize what it meant. And honestly, I didn't know what to trust. So in this conversation, you're going to hear Paul's story about going to Nicaragua for a decade to help small coffee farmers. And then he came back to America to create Fair Trade and to see how it helps people. And it really doesn't cost us anymore, often zero. You can literally walk into your grocery store, look for a product like cherry tomatoes, for instance, and for no greater price, look on the bottom, buy the ones with the Fair Trade stamp and know you're helping a truckload of people live a sustainable life and treat the earth well. You'll learn that all you need to do to convert to purchasing Fair Trade is look at the labels. So you're going to hear all about that in the episode here. I also really enjoyed getting to know Paul. We just really resonated. I think you'll enjoy him as well. I actually might go with him to Costa Rica later in the year to visit some coffee farmers with some big company CEOs and look at how we can help spread the message. So his new book, the title is Every Purchase Matters: How Fair Trade Farmers, Companies, and Consumers Are Changing the World. I found the book just intriguing. Now, you get engaged, though, in this concept, in this initiative right now. Just go look for Fair Trade products on your next grocery trip. Well, as you're going to hear, Paul found his purpose and created a career around it. If you want to hone in on your purpose and how to fulfill it in your work or business, well, that's really what I do best. You can connect with me at kevinmiller.co or email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. All right, coming up next is Paul Rice, and we're going to talk about how we can help humanity and the planet with our simple purchases. Let's look to evolve ourselves. Paul, when your book came across my desk and I saw the topic and started digging in a little bit, my first interest was I thought, my kids will appreciate this. I've got kids in their 20s. Capitalism is a big issue, gets a lot of negative feedback. And so to see your own, testimony of having gone from this anti-capitalist person to a conscious capitalist, I thought I really like that. And then, we generally, we were talking offline, I have, therapists and I have professors on here and we're talking about personal development and self-improvement. But as part of being a human, I do want to feel like, am I helping things? Am I contributing? And I think I'm doing that, but just in my life, I want to think that I care about the environment, that I care about humanity. And then as I start reading, your book about what you've done and what you're doing, I ultimately feel pretty ignorant. So this is my curiosity into what matters, and how I can help and actually integrate it into my life. Fair enough?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay.
Let's get into it. Sounds like fun.
Let's get into it. Okay, so this is interesting. Before we got on here, I texted one of my kids. He is 19, out of high school, and looking at what he wants to do. Moved up to Denver to be near some of his siblings, and he's working at Starbucks, one of the main characters in your book here. And he said he's been trying to learn about Starbucks and what they're doing in fair trade. He says they claim a lot. He's not really sure, but he's interested. So here he is. I mean, this is a 19-year-old kid. He's interested. He knows a little bit. He's actually working at a place that participates. And yet he's realizing that he doesn't really know. And I think what I'm reading into that is he's wondering, is it really, can he trust it? What can he trust? That feels like top of the list.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think a lot of us are there, Kevin. We don't know what to believe
Yeah.
about, the products that we buy, about the companies, where we shop. There's a lot of information out there. Some of it's positive, some of it's negative. And I think we're all kind of hungry, increasingly, and the data shows this quite clearly. Increasingly, Americans are reading the label, right? We're reading the label on the package. We want to know what's inside our coffee, our chocolate. We want to know about our apparel. We want to know what the environmental impact was. We want to know what the social impact was. And, speaking to your sentiments a few minutes ago, I think at the core of that is a desire to do no harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who wants to feel on their conscience that, children were put to work in the fields to produce our cocoa that we, enjoy in a chocolate bar, right? No one wants that. And so I think first and foremost, there's just this notion that the global supply chain is huge. There are so many unknowns. We don't really know what the conditions are of farmers and workers around the world or the impact on the environment, but we know we don't want to do harm. Yeah. And so that kind of is at the core of this premise that every purchase matters and that we can actually do good, not only not do harm, but we can do good in the world through the products that we choose.
All right. So fair trade is, as you say, the third most well-known, stamp or label in the category behind organic and non-GMO, correct?
Right. That's right.
Okay. So here's my admission. I have paid attention to those to a degree, just for my own health, purely self-focused, and I'm just thinking about what I put in my mouth, how it affects me personally, without any thought necessarily to, what's happening to the people producing it. That's where I started, in essence. And then understanding, now I do have some awareness of fair trade, and you see that with, different companies that talk about sustainability. We've had some folks who've advertised with the show, like, Outer Known, that's Kelly Slater's, clothing brand, and they really bill it as sustainable and whatnot. And I choose to trust that. But I'll admit that there's been always that question of even that with organic. You read other stuff and they go, oh, well, they put that label on there, non-GMO, but it's not really. They put the cage free on the eggs, but it doesn't really. And so I just found myself in a place of trust and sometimes feeling like, oh my gosh, it's really easy just to scrap it all. Just buy whatever's, cheapest or seems healthiest or whatever, and not give it credit. So on your side with fair trade, obviously, I mean, you're going to make the pitch that you can trust it, but help us with that. Help us with understanding that fair trade, what it really means and why we can trust that. Even with a big box company like Starbucks, they've got their, and I'm making this up because I don't even know, but they've got their, Kenya dark roast in a bag for, I don't know, $9.99. And then it's then here's the fair trade bag and it's, say $10.99. Correct me, but I'm going to assume that a lot of times we may spend more. And I'm going, do I believe it enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot to unpack there, brother. So
okay, well, that's what I want to unpack. I'm ignorant. Help me, educate me.
So I'm going to give you the fair trade 101, but first, I just want to say Starbucks doesn't do fair trade anymore.
That's okay. You said that.
So Starbucks was the one that got away.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'll tell you more about that. They have their in-house program, but Starbucks worked with fair trade for a number of years and then went in a different direction. And we can come back to that. You mentioned the word trust.
Yeah.
And that is so important to all of us, to all consumers, when we buy a product, when we give our business and our dollars to a company. Trust is key, right? First of all, trust that the product is going to perform the way it's promised, that the quality will deliver. Secondly, that it's safe. That we're not going to get sick if we eat something or drink something, right? So that there's kind of the most basic level of trust in terms of how it impacts our health and the product features. But then we also want to trust that these companies are not harming the world, that they're not poisoning the land, that they're not exploiting workers. And so there's a level of trust that, is required by consumers and that is growing, right? If you look
Yeah.
at how Gen Z and millennial consumers in particular think about corporate America, they expect corporate America to deliver on social and environmental goodness, basically.
Yeah.
And they're willing to shift purchasing in order to support companies that they perceive as delivering. But we're all skeptical. I mean, you spoke to the skepticism earlier. Well, can I really trust this?
Yeah.
And the data shows that independent third-party certification validating the claim of a company adds value. Consumers tend to believe an independent audit more than just a company saying, hey, I'm paying my workers more money. Take my word for it, right? And the bigger the company, the more skeptical the consumer is. And so therein lies the value of third-party certification like organics, like non-GMO, like fair trade, right? With a fair trade label, you don't have to take that company's word for it, that they're taking care of the workers, on the other side of the world who are making that coffee. You've got an independent audit that's verifying that. So I think, there may be some skepticism about the certification labels too, sure. But in general, the trend is corporate America is looking for some way to validate their claims to us because, we see value in that independent oversight and that independent validation. But let me explain what fair trade is. My life's work.
Yeah. I know this is super elementary, but I'm going here and going, well, I know the concept, but I don't know. And I want, and I should take the time. If I care, I should take the time to understand.
Well, I think most people, in fact, our surveys show that about 67% of American adults have seen that fair trade certified label and they know what it means. I picked this up at Trader Joe's. You can see the fair trade label right there, front and center on the fair trade of Trader Joe's Ethiopian coffee, right? So 67% of Americans, that's a lot of people, have seen that label and they have a reasonable understanding of what it means. It means something good, right? It means that farmers are getting more money. That's the general.
Paul, let me ask you on the current stat. Well, I guess it's current. Your book is, I don't think, as of our recording, hasn't even come out yet, but I got the galley copy. But in that, I think you give that percentage and then you say, however, 1% purchasing of fair trade.
1% of market share.
Of market share.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So, and actually in coffee, it's 6% of market share. 6% of all coffee imported into the U.S. last year was fair trade certified. But in other product categories like tea or sugar or apparel, it's much smaller, right? We're just getting started, right? Coffee was our first product. We started certifying 26 years ago. And that's kind of our biggest product category to date. But anyway, suffice to say, I think most people have an association that fair trade means a better deal for the farmer. The double click on that, and one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I think there's curiosity. Well, tell me more. How does fair trade actually work? Well, I have a vague notion of what it is, but what actually is it? It's a standard. It's a rigorous 200-point checklist of social, labor, and environmental criteria that farm owners and factory owners, because we certify factories now, have to meet in order to pass their annual audit. They get audited every year against that standard. And, the standard has all the basic stuff, right? No child labor, no slave labor. There's a long list of toxic pesticides that you cannot use, benefits for workers, worker safety and health measures, maternity leave for women, like stuff that you would expect to see in a sustainability standard, a robust sustainability standard that has both the human side and the nature side, right? That's the standard. That's what fair trade certification is all about. It's a standard that's audited. And when those farms or factories meet the standard in their annual audit, then they can wear that fair trade certified label on their product, loud and proud. And now here's the punchline. The corporate partners that we work with agree to pay more money. So there's a market reward for all that hard work that those coffee farmers or those tea farmers are doing around the world. There's a reward in terms of a premium, small premium, but small money adds up and makes a big difference in those communities. And so what you'll see in fair trade communities around the world is farmers investing in healthcare, in education, in reforestation, right? And environmental stewardship, in infrastructure that'll help them process their own harvest so that they can add value and sell a higher value add product. Quality, they're investing in quality. So all of these amazing outcomes, and this is particularly relevant, by the way, we can get into the news cycle if you want. I mean, everyone has read that USAID, the instrument of international aid of the U.S. government, is being closed, right? And so how do we help poor people around the world in this new era? Well, market-based solutions like fair trade, right? Where when you go out and buy fair trade coffee, that sends money back to those communities, in this case, Ethiopia, that helps them invest in solving their own problems. And that's why I got so excited about it, because at the end of the day, fair trade is about you and me with our purchasing decisions, helping farmers and workers around the world on a journey out of poverty.
Okay. Again, I feel like Captain Elementary here, but this is
Well,
why
right?
you're on the show. And I, as I talk to even my peers and whatnot, I think a lot of us are in this boat. We don't really understand how this is all working. Can I say that most of the fair trade focus is on imports. So we're talking from America right here. It is on imports, imported products like coffee. We don't get coffee that I know of from America. My point being, the products that we get, let's say we get, we just had some oranges in here that from California, right? So in your neck of the woods, and I'm going to assume that the working conditions for the most part, I mean, it's America, that they got to be kept up to scale, and we're not hopefully raping the land or the people in essence. But over here where our coffee comes from, what's that?
You'd be surprised.
Okay, well, again, educate me. I'm going to try to paint a picture and then have you reconcile for me.
Yeah.
But coffee over here, which we're consuming like mad, is primarily coming from these other countries.
Yeah.
And at the rate that we're buying, at the consumption levels, a company can come in, be buying it from and kind of owning a whole area and drive down the price. And in that essence, rape the land and rape the people. And there's not much they can do. They're totally dependent on that. Thus the fair trade. Tell me about the picture I'm looking at.
So you got half of it right.
Okay. All right.
The conditions of farm workers on banana plantations in Honduras, the conditions of coffee farmers living in the mountains of Ethiopia, the conditions of cocoa or cacao farmers in Ivory Coast. They're tough. They're tough. Low wages, often very difficult, sometimes unsafe working conditions, terrible housing, often environmental destruction on and around those farms. That is sadly the dark side of business. That is sadly all too often the norm in these global supply chains. And so fair trade was invented. And by the way, I didn't invent it. I brought fair trade certification to the US 26 years ago, borrowing an experience that started in Europe a decade before, right? So we're standing on the shoulders of the Europeans who kind of came up with this idea. There were a few pioneers in this market when I came in, but we created the label to mainstream the movement here. And what fair trade is doing is shining a light on that global supply chain. It's giving us transparency all the way back to that farm, right? Past all the middlemen. And then it's creating a mechanism for the market, for consumers and for companies to reward those producers who are performing in a higher way, in a more sustainable way, to help them take care of their workers and take care of the land and make more money in the process, right? It's win-win. So that's fair trade's claim to fame. And we really focused on the so-called third world, on Africa, on Asia, on Latin America for most of our history, because we felt like that was where we could make the most impact. And to your point, aside from a few coffee farms in Hawaii, we don't grow coffee. We don't grow coffee in the mainland U.S. So many of the things that we enjoy every day, bananas, tea, coffee, these are grown around the world. And so we saw the certification of those global commodities as a way to fight poverty and improve sustainability around the world. Okay, fast forward to 2016. So now I started the organization in 98. So we're already, 18 years old. We started to hear from our market partners, from Whole Foods, from Costco, from all kinds of retailers that we now have partnerships with. Hey, don't you realize that we have an issue with farm labor here in the US? Don't you realize that farm workers in the US also, in most cases, live below poverty line, live in terrible housing, don't have access to health care, can't send their kids to college, right? And so we began to look at the fair trade model overseas and think about how we could adapt it to the US. And so we did that. In 2016, we certified our first farm in the US, an amazing farm called Wholesome Family Farms. They own farms in Mexico. They'd already been fair trade certified in Mexico, so they'd seen how it works. They have a farm in Arizona. We certified their Arizona farm, and we were off to the races. And now we're certifying a growing number of farms and factories here in the U.S. and bringing the same kinds of benefits to workers here who, if we're talking about agricultural workers, Kevin, it's kind of the one of the lowest ends of the totem pole, right? In terms of in terms of pay and worker safety and all those things. So we're global now, and there's this Buy America ethos that's on the rise here, and we get it, and we're tapping into that because Buy America, but buy fair trade.
So is it? And again, I can't believe I don't know this, and I should have gone to the grocery before we talked, but can I assume that you're saying that this is what it does for the farmers? There is a premium. It's small, but it's going to cost the companies more. So if I'm looking at my coffee bag A and coffee bag B is fair trade, can I assume it is going to cost a little more? Cost me as the purchaser?
Great question. I see you've got my book on the shelf behind you. It's one of the chapters in the book. Does sustainability have to cost more? And it's a really important question for the sustainability movement and for companies, because I think the assumption until now has been, sustainable products are going to cost you more.
Well, I'm used to that with health and wellness overall. That's kind of the thought. If it's healthy, it costs more, which generally is truly the case.
But if you've been buying organics for years, what you've noticed yourself is that the price of organics relative to a non-organic or a conventional product, over time, it's come down. It's much more competitive. I mean, it used to be 20, 30 cents a pound more to buy, for example, organic bananas. Now at my local Safeway, organic bananas are 89 cents a pound and conventional bananas are 79 cents a pound. So you're paying a little bit more, but there is this kind of reduced cost for sustainable products over time. And we see the same in fair trade. We see fair trade products historically costing a little more, but now increasingly companies are finding a way to cover that premium to the farmer without charging the customer more. So I'll give you an example. We work with this fantastic company called Nature Sweet. They have those snacking tomatoes, those little, bursts of flavor and deliciousness. And they're in that distinct, like volcano-shaped plastic container. You'll see it at the grocery store. Nature Sweet. They're the largest brand of snacking tomatoes. You'll find them everywhere from Whole Foods to Walmart. And we started working with Nature Sweet 3 years ago. And they said, we want to test fair trade and see if it works for us. They tested it for a year. They found that it brought real benefits to their workers in terms of, the extra money that allowed workers to build, indoor plumbing in their houses. A lot of their workers were using outhouses. We're talking about Mexico. They didn't have indoor plumbing. They started using the fair trade premium to build, bathrooms in their homes. Something that, my grandfather didn't have in this country, so we're not that far away from it.
Yeah.
These workers built bathrooms. They put their kids into high school and college with scholarship funds. So Nature Sweet loved the impact. It loved the consumer response to having the fair trade label on their brand, on their package. And so a year into the pilot, they said, okay, we're going to go all in. We're going 100% fair trade, and we're not going to charge the consumer more. Today, 100% of Nature Sweet's snacking tomatoes. Uh, that's a huge volume, and they're everywhere. And if you turn that, that little volcano over, you'll see the label. 100% are fair trade. And they're not charging more than what they were charging before. It's, free to the consumer. Now you might ask, well, how do they pay for that premium? How are they covering that? And the answer is the benefits for the company are so great that it's able to offset the extra money that's going back to the worker. And I asked recently that Rodolfo Spielman is the CEO. He's a visionary. And I love him because he's emblematic of this new breed of capitalist that refuses to believe that either you can be sustainable or profitable, but you can't be both. That trade-off mentality in the past. He believes you can be both. He believes sustainability will drive the success of the firm. And I asked him, Rodolfo, how are you guys benefiting from this fair trade thing? Or are you taking a margin hit? Are you taking a hit on your profitability in order to pay the premium to your workers? And he said, no, the number one problem in agriculture today, whether it's in the US or Mexico or anywhere in the world, the number one problem is access to labor. Believe it or not, everyone is experiencing labor shortages, especially around harvest time. So he said, anything we can do to keep our workers happy and keep them here is a huge benefit. So then he gave me a data point that literally blew my mind. He said, our worker retention level is 8 times the industry average. So what that means is at the end of the harvest, when the workers go home, for a month before then they come back for the next cycle, 8 times more workers are coming back to his farms than in the industry as a whole. What that means is he's spending less money on recruiting new workers because his workers are coming back. He's spending less money training up new workers. Because he has a more experienced workforce, the productivity is higher. And so he estimates that all of these benefits for his company offset the extra, in this case, 2 cents a pound is the fair trade premium for tomatoes, right? And so that for me, brother, is like sustainable business at its best. It's win, win, win. The consumer gets a sustainable product. Companies find value for the company, and farmers, workers, and the environment all get protected at the same time.
Well, first, I think that's beautiful. And my first thought is when I go to the grocery after we talk, which I'm going to, I'm going to go to my categories on my grocery list and look for fair trade. But here's another question then it's still in the same arena here. I have the thought, whether it's fully educated or not, that the more I pay, generally it is going to be a healthier product. I mean, if I'm going to get the lowest price pound of beef, that it's going to be the most junk-laden hunk of meat ever, as opposed to over here with the grass-fed, grass-finished, whatever beef. Same thing with my, with any category of food specifically, I'm looking at that. I don't buy the cheapest stuff because I figure it's cheap for a reason. And it's got, again, I'm thinking from a health standpoint, can I make the correlation that generally these companies that are doing fair trade, and again, I can go do my homework here at the grocery store next, but that these companies who are doing fair trade, they're not the cheapest ones. They're not the ones at the bottom of the barrel cost wise. They are the mid to higher end already products that we are probably looking at for literal just health benefits of what we're putting in our mouth. It's not pesticides and antibiotics and hormones and all that junk. That those are generally going to be the ones fair trade, which to me is probably saying I'm probably already shopping in the fair trade arena already. And if I just go switch over to the ones that literally have the label, I may not spend a dime more.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a really important call out, Kevin, because, the reality is the companies that have moved first on fair trade and organics and non-GMO and sustainability in general, right? Those are not the bottom feeders. No, those are not they tend not to be the bargain brands. They tend to be mid-level and specialty or gourmet type brands. So yeah, to your point, you're not buying Folgers, right? You're buying Starbucks or Pete's or Green Mountain. You're buying in that kind of,
I just lost my Folgers sponsorship, by the way, but keep going.
Oh shit.
No, keep going. Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Well, Folgers and Maxwell House, they don't do fair trade. They don't really do anything on sustainability. So, most consumers don't buy Folgers and Maxwell House. 50% of consumers are buying either mid-level or higher level. So if you're already buying a higher quality coffee, then yeah, you could find comparable fair trade and organic versions of that where you wouldn't pay more money.
Yeah, which like with coffee, I'm in the Starbucks and Pete's category, which we'll come back to Starbucks, but I want to stay on this category. If we go outside of food and like looking at clothes, that's been one where I'll notice now that, a kid needs some underwear or socks or whatever. And in our privileged culture right now, I don't even have to drive to a store. We just get online, go to Amazon is the easy one and just pick it up.
Yeah.
And now what I'm seeing is some of the brands aren't there. Some of the brands that you might like aren't there. So you got to go elsewhere. But the brands that are there right next to them is I can't remember what they call it, but the Walmart brand, which looks dead on. Of course, every brand these days, or not every brand, but the grocery stores, the clothing, whatever, they all have their unique or their own branded, competitive product next to it.
Yeah.
And like with that, I figure if I'm going to buy the Walmart socks or the Amazon socks, to not be politically correct, I guess. But that's the bottom feeders. That's the ones where I figure I'm not helping the planet by buying this, but I'm helping my wallet.
Don't assume that.
Okay.
Don't assume.
Okay.
That Amazon and Walmart are only selling low end, like bad for the planet products. It's really interesting, Kevin, because, capitalism is an interesting thing. If a market opportunity emerges to make money, most companies will try and get in on it. And so we work with Amazon and we work with Walmart. And both of those companies, Amazon launched what they call the climate pledge friendly product line, or I should say not product line, but badge. A number of years ago, all fair trade certified products meet that climate pledge friendly. So you can go on Amazon, search on climate pledge friendly products, and you'll have, a ton of fair trade products available to you on Amazon, right? We are now in conversations with Amazon around their private label apparel. And wouldn't it be cool if, that $1 billion business flipped to fair trade factories? In the case of Walmart, they have their equivalent. That's weird.
Phone call in the middle of the podcast. That's all right.
I know. That is really weird.
Fair enough. That's candid.
In the case of Walmart has a very big commitment to sustainability. They have now for a number of years. We actually started working with their Sam's Club subsidiary, which is kind of like a Costco, Sam's Club. It's a club store. We started working with them in 2005. Sam's Club coffee is 100% fair trade. If you go into Sam's Club, the brand name is Members Mark. That's like their private brand, Members Mark. Yeah. You go in and buy Sam's Club Members Mark coffee. It's all fair trade. It doesn't cost more than what it cost before. It is one of the largest brands of fair trade coffee in the world. And that's owned by Walmart. On the Walmart side, I told the story of NatureSweet and the fair trade tomatoes. Walmart brought that company in and is selling fair trade tomatoes. Walmart is the largest seller of fair trade tomatoes in the world today. And so what that reveals is that any and every company will at some point decide they don't want to get left behind by the sustainability movement, by the move of consumers to look for more sustainable products. Uh-huh. And, in the case of Walmart, I quote Walmart CEO, Doug McMillon, in my book, because a number of years ago, he gave kind of a historic speech about regenerative agriculture and Walmart's commitment to sustainability. And, for a company that big, it takes time, but I'm excited about what Walmart is trying to do in sustainability, not just in fair trade, but in a lot of things. I'm just going to, show this chocolate. This is the fair trade certified label. This is one of Walmart's house brands of chocolate. Better Goods, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. It looks familiar.
and it says premium Swiss dark chocolate, right? So it's not the cheapest chocolate in terms of quality.
Yeah.
But they're all in on fair trade chocolate, and it's a Walmart brand. So basically, my message is look for the label.
Yeah.
Whatever store you shop in, whatever product you're looking at, if you see a fair trade label, you know that product was audited, that those farmers and those workers were taken care of, and that they got a better price.
Okay. Two areas of interest I have on this, and we alluded to it earlier when I mentioned Starbucks. So as a basic consumer, which I'm going to call myself for the most part, as a basic consumer, can easily think, okay, or my kids, capitalists, capitalism and, the evil people out there trying to make a buck and profit off of everyone. That will now this big company wants the fair trade label. Well, they're going to pay for it. They pay you off. They're going to, whatever money they put up, and you're going to do that, which comes back. We're back to trust. And of course, that's one of the stories in the book. And you mentioned it before. The one that got away is Starbucks, as they had like 5% or something, just very small fair trade amount. And then if I got the story right, or the essence of it, over in Europe, McDonald's made a big play in a certain area to be, kind of a sustainable label type thing, and was threatening market share. So Starbucks, looking for profit, fair enough, says, okay, we want that. They come to you and you hit them with the big proposal to go all in, as you just said that, some of these other companies have done, to go all in. And they said, yes. So you had it. You had lassoed the big kahuna. Yeah. I mean, you're already planning Christmas for the family with this one. And then they say two conditions. And they have two conditions that would have caused you to alter your, how you qualified, fair trade, and you would have gotten them. And you said no. And they said bye. And Howard Schultz at the time walked out of your building, and you did not get that deal, which would have been gigantic. So I'm saying that because the skeptical people, that most folks listening to this show, I think, are educated and rightly skeptical that this is not something. That's your story to give us trust that this can't be bought. They have to meet the requirements.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They get that all right.
And that story is illuminating, right? Because it indicates how we live by the rules of the standard, right? The fair trade standard, like the organic standard, is rigorous. It's independently audited. And, we take great pains to maintain the integrity of the system, even when that means that, we lose the opportunity to do certain deals or to work with certain companies. What's interesting about the Starbucks story, though, is that we were both right. And here's what I mean by that. We were right in the moment. This was going back to 2008, 2009. We were right in that moment to basically say, what you're asking us to do is outside of our standard. We can't do it. But they were right in that what they advocated for was a more holistic version of fair trade that worked not only with small family farmers organized into co-ops, which is kind of where fair trade began. They also wanted us to certify big farms, big coffee plantations that exploit the shit out of their workers normally. And they wanted oversight of those plantations, right? Because Starbucks bought from everyone. They bought from the small farmer. They bought from the big farmer. All the countries, right? Their main thing was quality. So they said, hey, you're about fairness and improved livelihoods. Why don't you work with the workers on the big plantations? And we were just, globally as a fair trade movement, we weren't there yet. And so we said, no, that's not really who we work with. That's not really what we do. Sorry. They were right. We were wrong. We needed to innovate the model. We needed to expand the model. And 3 years later, we did. Here in the U.S., we separated from the European fair trade movement in order to do our own thing, in order to innovate the model, in order to make it more holistic. we called that vision Fair Trade for All. Fair trade for all, right? Like not just small family farmers, but the farm workers on big farms, and not just coffee, but also a whole range of new products that we've launched since then, like seafood, fair trade seafood. That's a thing. Fair trade dairy, fair trade apparel, fair trade and cosmetics, right? So fair trade for all is here in the US, our innovation of the global fair trade movement in saying this model could work not just for one little community, it could work for all kinds of workers and farmers in all kinds of industries and countries. And so, I went back after we expanded the model. I went back to Starbucks. I want to say 2013, 2014. I went back to Howard. I have great admiration for Howard. I've got his number in my phone. He's, in my mind, someone who really cares about sustainable business. And I went back to them and said, hey, we've expanded the model. We can work with you now on a 100% basis. But the window of opportunity had shut. They had moved on. They developed their own in-house program. They call it Cafe Practices. If you go into any Starbucks and look on a package, there's language there that says committed to 100% ethical sourcing. Uh-huh. And so, some companies choose to work with an independent certifier like us, with an independent label. Others try and do it on their own in-house. And that was ultimately the direction that Starbucks went in. By the way, fast forward to last year, they got sued by the National Consumer Union for making claims about 100% ethical sourcing, because it was discovered, investigative reporters discovered some really bad labor conditions on some of the farms that were selling to Starbucks. And so, full circle in this conversation, the value of independent.
I was going to say the third part. Yeah.
Is you reduce the chance of a scandal like that where, Starbucks is getting sued now because it's felt like they're misrepresenting, what is happening in their supply chain.
Well, and to that, okay, I again, I have a basic consumer question on that as I go look. You mentioned ethical sourcing. I have come from the health standpoint. You mentioned seafood. That's what it was. And wow. I thought, okay, when I'm looking for seafood, I'm primarily looking for wild caught. And I'm getting to the point now of, I'm questioning how much can I trust that, just like the whole cage-free, range-free eggs and whatnot. But to take it for what we hope it to be, like wild caught and whatnot, fair trade doesn't necessarily mean organic. You could have something that's non-organic that may not be the organic healthiest thing, but they are fair trade. So they do have good practices. So for myself, I'm not going to be looking for both. I'm going to be looking for organic, or, in this essence with seafood, like a wild caught, the most natural and fair trade, because one doesn't necessarily equal the other. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And, and most consumers, Kevin, are like you, meaning if they're interested in health and wellness and they consume organics, they're relatively more likely to want fair trade, and vice versa. Most consumers of fair trade products want that added assurance of the organic label. So just here's a little fun fact for you. 70% of all fair trade farmers in the world, and we work with 1 million farmers in 72 countries, right? 70% of those farmers are also certified organic. So there's a strong overlap, double cert, as it were, of fair trade and organics in our agricultural program. But if you're not organic, it doesn't mean you can poison the land. Right. In the fair trade standard, we also have environmental criteria, which, for example, there's a long list of chemicals that you're not allowed to use. You're not allowed to clear cut the forest. There are soil conservation and water conservation measures. So, it's kind of like an organic light. So fair trade isn't just about the worker. It's also about the land. But like I said, 70% of our farmers go that extra mile and get organic certified because, frankly, organic agriculture in many of these crops is the way that those farmers see, the best way that those farmers see to preserve the land for their future generations, right? Yeah. It's not just a market opportunity for them. It's a commitment to the land and a multi-generational perspective that with organics, You're not poisoning the land. You're not depleting the soil. You're preserving the land for your kids and your grandkids.
Okay, so it would be fair to say that outside of organic or non-GMO, if it has a fair trade label on it, then I can expect it to be however many clicks healthier in all shape, from the product to obviously how it's the land and whatever and the workers, than the one without anything on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think, I'd love to I'm sure you would too, have the grocery store get to the point to where there's a section of fair trade products. Cause right now you're going to go, first world problems. My gosh, I got to actually go look for a second at each product and pick the one, that is. But yeah, I'd love to see it segmented. I want to hit on an area as I was reading the book. We would like to believe that these big companies actually do care, but let's say they don't. And some of the stories, were prompted. Your Starbucks story, and then there was, another one that I'm not remembering at the moment, but they were both caused by a consumer demand and a branding issue and a profitability issue. They didn't come at it going, you know what? I think we want to do good for the world. It was because, hey, somebody else just claimed, McDonald's, just said that they're the healthiest coffee or whatever. And we don't want them taking market share. So we're going to come in and do this. So let's say that there is a capitalistic percentage of these companies that don't give a crap. The only reason they're doing it is for profitability. Okay. Then we're back to us as a consumer and voting for our dollars is the best way to make it happen, even if profitability is the main motive, still not the ethical aspect of it.
Yeah. It's become clear to me. I've been in the fair trade movement now since 1990 when I was living in Nicaragua. And you haven't asked me my origin story, so I'll tell you stories of Nicaragua if you want. But basically, what I have observed in the last 35 years is if we pitch fair trade and similar sustainability initiatives as the right thing to do, that pitch will resonate with some companies. Ben and Jerry, think about iconic, socially responsible brands, Ben and Jerry's, Patagonia. There are a few brands that will do something because it's the right thing to do. But most companies have to demonstrate a business case, right? It can't be a money loser. And so, we have tried to appeal to the enlightened self-interest of corporate America and show them that the old version of capitalism, which is highly exploitative and extractive, it's evolving. There's a new version of capitalism emerging, which some people call conscious capitalism or stakeholder capitalism or profit with purpose. Like there are different ways of describing it, but it is this notion that sustainability, taking care of the farmers and the workers and the environment on the other side of the world, that can be good for business, right? So yes, it's the right thing to do to make sure that, the coffee farmers that are growing the coffee we drink can keep their kids in school. Yeah, straight up. It's just morally justified. It makes us feel good because it's a good thing. And it's good for business. And I've spent my career proving that, or trying to prove it, trying to demonstrate, to the Whole Foods and the Walmarts and the everyones of the world that things like fair trade are going to be good for business. So you don't have to, succumb to this trade-off of, I'll maximize profits for shareholders, or I'll be fair trade, but I can't be both. Bullshit. You can be both. And the leading brands that we work with are proving, they're architecting this new version of capitalism. Kevin, I see capitalism as in like a 50-year evolutionary cycle.
Okay.
When I started Nicaragua's first fair trade co-op in 1990, most of the buyers around the world that we were talking to didn't give a shit about the farmer. All they wanted was quality and price. And, you fast forward to today, 30 years later, the coffee industry is one of the most sustainable industries in terms of production because so many brands have realized, holy shit, if we don't pay our farmers enough money, they're not going to be able to produce the quality that we need. So it's a win-win, right? And so I think that evolutionary process toward a more enlightened version of capitalism, grounded in this notion of, win-win-win, or what Michael Porter at Harvard calls shared value, the notion that new value is created that's shared by all of the stakeholders. I believe this is our collective future. And fair trade is in many ways like a really fascinating laboratory,
Yeah.
where this premise is being experimented. And I write about it in the book. I mean, I think this book is going to appeal to consumers who are interested in knowing, where our stuff comes from and how we can vote with our dollars for a better world. But it's also going to appeal to business people who are trying to figure out, how can we engineer businesses that are good for people, planet, and are profitable?
Well, and you may have just taken the wind out of my another question, or just answered it, because it's one thing to on voting with dollars on what I go purchase from the grocery store next. But the other is as people are looking, and I want to kind of veer into the capitalist concept or drama there a little bit, or just topic. And how many from an investing standpoint, this is the question I was going to ask, but you may have just nullified it. From an investing standpoint, would say, look, I'm going to invest in these companies and I'm going to choose to invest in fair trade, in essence, focused companies. Would they do that if they did not get as much return for their dollar as going with a non? I mean, that's another, it just brings it to a personal level. How much do we really care? So I was going to ask that, but to some degree, are you saying that that's really not much of the case because it is just as profitable for the most part?
It is. Yeah. And actually, we found a lot of research on how companies that are committed to sustainability are performing relative to, Fortune 500 or relative to the Dow. And there's clear evidence that social and environmental performance is linked to financial performance. Now, those companies that are kind of leading the way toward a more sustainable model of business are actually outperforming from an investment perspective, and generating, better results for their investors, for their shareholders, than companies that are lagging. And so, again, we're not there yet, right? We're on a long-term transition of capitalism, but I'm feeling incredibly hopeful and optimistic when I see company after company start to move in this direction, more slowly than I would like. I lived for 11 years in Nicaragua, so I feel the weight of millions of farmers on my shoulders, farmers that have to make tough choices because they're not getting a fair price for their harvest. So I want the pace of change to speed up for sure. But, bottom line is we're making progress, and I feel confident about our future.
Okay. Well, a big part of this that I like, Paul, that again is why we're having this conversation here, is we see the news, we see these global issues all over. People are paying attention to them and spending time. And there's even a part of me going, I can't care about everything. And there's some aspect of, do I know about the people right around me that need care? How can I care and make a difference on the other side of the globe? Maybe there's some charity I can help. We had Scott Harrison on here not long ago with Charity Water,
it's cool.
and appreciated that. But what this gives me the opportunity to do is make a difference right now when I walk or drive, depending on how much groceries I think I'm going to get, half a mile down the road to the grocery store. And I'm going to go in there and spend, I'm getting stuff for a couple of, I spend $100, $200 or whatever.
Yeah.
I can benefit the world right now just by choosing this product over this product with the fair trade thing that may not cost a nickel more. That's where I feel like doggone my ignorance for why, not having all done that, and why we're doing this here to let people know and go, just get the fair trade label. You'll make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Kevin. I mean, honestly, it's why I wrote the book, because I I want to elevate this really simple notion that we all have incredible power through our purchasing decisions. And I know a lot of people are feeling pretty discouraged with politics in America.
Yeah.
And you don't have to wait 2 years or 4 years, to lift your voice, to vote for change. You can vote for change this afternoon when you go to the store,
Yeah.
right? Your purchasing decisions, choosing this product over that product, organic or fair trade or whatever flavor of sustainability, right? They're all good. Fair trade's not the only one. There's so many other, there's so many expressions now of sustainable products that have huge impact on workers, on the environment. And, I'm sure you've studied mindfulness. And yet we usually don't bring a mindful presence when we're at the grocery store. We're usually not thinking about the impact of, the coffee that we buy on the world. And so really, when you think about it, the change that I'm suggesting to people everywhere is if you just give a little more thought to the impact that you can have today, right now, by choosing sustainable products, it really will change the world. And I've seen it. I've lived in the field, I've worked with farmers, and I've seen how powerful these sustainability labels like fair trade are in terms of empowering farmers and workers on a journey out of poverty, in terms of keeping people hopeful. Um, Immigration is in the news cycle. Guess what? Most people immigrate to flee poverty. What if we could help every farming family in Latin America have a dignified, decent living where they live?
Yeah.
People would not be hitting the road moving north.
Yeah.
They would stay on the land. Most people want to stay home. And they leave because, they're getting terrible prices for their harvests. For one reason or other, they can't make ends meet there. And so fair trade, in some ways, addresses the heart of the immigration issue, which is the livelihood of the people in Honduras, in Guatemala, and around, Latin America, who are just trying to keep their kids in school and put food on the table, just like us.
I'm sitting here thinking as you talk that, again, I just like with food, admitting that most of my focal point has gone towards, organic, non-GMO, just the health aspect for how it benefits me, white American Kevin, and just, I'm not thinking about the ramifications of where it was produced. And you were just talking, I thought, man, I'm doing the same thing with other products. You just mentioned quality with other products as well. Like, I'm here in Colorado, so outdoor gear, you're buying a new jacket and it's Patagonia or North Face or Marmot or whatever, the big brands are, and you're kind of buying for quality. I have not had a thought towards sustainability that much. I mean, the word goes around and maybe I'll see it here and there. Again, I mentioned Outer Known because they advertise with us, and I have a lot of pairs of Outer Known jeans now. But even there, my thought has been, I'm paying out the wazoo for that. I don't know if the quality is that much better, but it's sustainable. Wow. Again, just ignorant. And I'm now thinking on this aspect, how many things can I buy that are fair trade? So when I go to my grocery over here, can I find fair trade in most categories of products over there? We obviously have food, but then you've got toiletries, and you've got, cleaning products, and you've got personal hygiene and stuff. What categories am I able to find fair trade in?
Yeah, right on. So first of all, I love that you're working with Outer Known, because so are we. Right.
Oh,
and
okay,
a lot of their assortment is fair trade. Again, look for the label, because it takes a while to transform a supply chain. Most companies, when they jump into fair trade, they don't commit to going 100% from day one. Right. They want to experiment with it. They want to dip their toe in the water. They want to see if it's going to work. And then they'll certify a number of farms or a number of factories every year. And there will be, a gradual progression toward ideally 100% fair trade. So Patagonia, in the apparel space, was one of our pioneering brands. Patagonia now is almost 100% fair trade across all their assortments. I bet you didn't know that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, they're fair trade.
I
And
knew they were in that space, and I had
yeah,
heard some, but again, I haven't taken the time to investigate.
yeah, outer known. You talked about underwear a little earlier. Pact, P-A-C-T. Pact is a great
Okay.
brand of socks and underwear that we work with. Fair trade, organic cotton. Um, you know,
I was thinking about that because I just bought some underwear. I went to Amazon. I looked for some quality. I can't even tell you what brand I got, and I did not look for the fair trade label, and I could have,
yeah,
and I didn't do it.
yeah.
So
I mean, like in sheets and linens and
yeah.
towels, Bowl and Branch is an amazing brand that we work with. It's fair trade organic. Koyuchi. So yeah, in apparel and woven goods, we have been making inroads and improving the lives of factory workers in India, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in countries that really need the help. You asked about other product categories. As I mentioned, we certify seafood, so you can get fair trade shrimp and salmon and tuna. We certify beauty products now. Elf Beauty is one of our leading beauty brands. Elf is number 2 beauty brand in cosmetics brand in the U.S. And they're now up to like 85% fair trade across all their products. So it's really interesting to see how something that started 26 years ago in coffee, because that's where I worked with coffee farmers in Nicaragua back in the day. So that was what I knew. So when I started Fair Trade USA in 1998, we started with coffee, and the coffee industry was ready for real sustainability solutions that help the farmers. So, that's where we started. But from there, we grew into sugar and tea and chocolate, and now 30 different kinds of fresh fruits and vegetables, from bananas and mangoes to tomatoes and asparagus, right? And as I mentioned, apparel and home goods. We work with Pottery Barn and West Elm. You can get fair trade furniture. We started, as I mentioned, certifying farms and factories here in the U.S. So a lot of the things that aren't grown around the world but that are grown here, we can now certify. We work with Driscoll's on berries, raspberries, strawberries, blueberries. So it's really interesting to see the expansion of fair trade. And here's what's notable about that. We didn't go into all those industries, those new products, because, we woke up one day and said, hey, let's give fair trade seafood a try. No, the seafood industry came to us.
Okay.
Right. So all these industries are looking at the fair trade model and how successful it's been in coffee and calling us up and saying, hey, can you guys adapt that model to our industry? Can you make that work for tomatoes or for apparel or for seafood? And so it's been this really interesting process of co-creation with the industry, where the industry is saying, fair trade's amazing in coffee. Can we bring it to our industry and see how it'll work there? And I love that. For me, it validates what I was saying earlier about, this chapter of capitalism that we're in, where, leading companies, what I call lighthouse brands, are coming to us and saying, how can we evolve our business models in order to be successful and sustainable?
I was thinking of other categories. I assume that you're in the wine and alcohol categories as well.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Another one for me to keep in mind. You talked about your story, and I did, and I literally have my kids in mind. I appreciate capitalism plenty, even with, the downsides here and there. But with you going, this is literally, I'm reading out of page 28 in your book, that you came from this anti-capitalist ideology, revolutionary idealism, and moved to globalization and capitalism as the way to go.
Yeah.
I want you to, I'll ask you literally to speak to the Gen, whatever they are. They're in their mid 20s, this group. I mean, I've got, let's see, out of them, there's two or three in college. One's working at Starbucks. Yeah. She works at a coffee and bourbon bar that probably has, fair trade stuff there too. But with them struggling with, talk about the political climate with capitalism. Yeah. And they know dad's the consummate entrepreneur. They all grew up going to farmers market and selling goods. They understand that, but they're struggling with the positioning that they see of capitalism. So from your standpoint of coming from a lot of the feelings that they have, the angst that they have, that you obviously resonated with, to where you are now, give them your pitch.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, what I would say is this: I think we've all observed the potentially negative consequences for the planet, for the climate, for people, of what we might describe as kind of unbridled corporate greed.
Okay.
Companies that are simply trying to maximize profits for shareholders at any cost. And I think that was the dominant model of business, 30, 50 years ago. I think that is evolving. There's so many examples of companies that are doing better. And that's why I think of capitalism as in a transition. And so for those people who care about the state of the world, I think it's easy to fall into this mindset that, corporate greed is our biggest problem. That the state of the planet is a result of companies not stepping up and trying to do better. And that was very much my mindset in the summer of 1983, when I, a young idealist, graduated from college, decided I'm going to go abroad because I want to work with farmers. I want to be on the right side of history. I want to help solve global poverty. And I'm not going to do that from here in the U.S. I'm going to go and be a part of it. So I moved to Nicaragua in the summer. I bought a one-way ticket, actually, to Nicaragua in the summer of 83 to go work with farmers. And I thought I would stay for a year or two, but I ended up staying for 11 years. So I went in 83. I came back in 94. That was basically from 22 years of age until 33 years of age, the most formative years of my life. And I spent that decade working way up in the mountains with coffee farmers, very remote villages, off the grid, no electricity. These farmers were trying to learn how to produce in a more sustainable way and in a more productive way. And that was kind of the journey out of poverty. Was, if you're producing 1 ton of coffee on an acre, see if you can produce 2 tons of coffee, right? And I was a part of a lot of well-intentioned projects that were funded by international agencies that were trying to help these farmers do better. But Kevin, my experience for a number of years in those projects was that we didn't help farmers learn how to navigate the global market. And so during those years, I thought, capitalism is really the problem and international aid is the solution. And what I came to believe through that experience is, well, if farmers don't learn how to navigate the market, how to succeed in the market, our well-intentioned aid dollars, our well-intentioned projects are probably not going to work. And so I heard about fair trade, these crazy, mostly Europeans, who had built this fair trade model and who were willing to pay our coffee farmers more if we were selling direct. And in the summer of 1990, I organized Nicaragua's first fair trade coffee co-op. 24 families. We filled 1 container. We actually sold to a fair trade buyer based in Boston, a company called Equal Exchange. They were one of just a handful of companies here in the U.S. that called themselves fair trade. There was no movement to speak of, but there were a few, brave brands here in the U.S. So we sold this container to Equal Exchange. They paid us $1.40 a pound for our coffee at a time when the local middlemen in Nicaragua were paying 10 cents a pound.
Wow.
So our farmers got more than 10 times more that year. It meant they got to stay on the land. They kept their kids in school. They invested in quality. And then we were off to the races. I led that co-op for 4 years, grew it to 3,000 families. We were exporting hundreds of containers of coffee by my 4th year. And what I saw through that experience was capitalism that worked for the poor. And so my experience was fair trade can help free trade work for the poor. that it was a time of trickle down economics. And I thought trickle down economics is bullshit. Like, money does not trickle down to the poor. We found a way to make trickle down work. We found a way through fair trade for our farmers to get so much more money for their harvest, for their hard work, that they were able to keep kids in school and develop healthcare programs. We dug wells in many of our villages and brought clean drinking water to people for the first time, which immediately boosted health indicators. And so we did things for ourselves that otherwise we would have waited for the government to come do for us, or some well-intentioned aid agency to do for us. And so that's where my thinking around capitalism evolved. I went from being very skeptical of capitalism to realizing that within the global economy and through partnerships with companies and consumers, we do have the possibility to kind of harness that market-based solution in order to achieve a dramatically better life for poor farmers and workers around the world. And that's where, this notion of social capitalist emerged for me, is like, okay, all right, I'm going to learn how to ride that bucking bronco. Like, we're going to help poor people learn how to be successful in the global economy. And that's been my quest ever since. I've been at it since 1990.
Well, it's impressive. It's such a great help. This is why we're doing this. I wanted to understand. And I think there's so many and I'm going to pick on my own kind, privileged white folk that mean well, but we just don't know. And even if we get an inkling, we don't know what to trust. And I have found myself there so often, and not wanting to throw my hands in the air, but just really again, ignorant. And I almost sometimes feeling guilty that I don't invest so much to figure this stuff out, but there's a lot to figure out. So we look to the experts, and we have Paul Rice on the show to school us. And man, I'm thank you for educating me, and I'm honored to put this out. I'm going to put this out to my kids. I'm actually I made a timestamp in this. I'm probably going to send them this last bit about you, just on capitalism and your own journey. So listen to this first, and then educate them, because I feel like, I'll go and share with the office. Hey, everybody, buy fair trade. And I'm really eager to go to the grocery store right now and play with that. I may do, you know what? I'll do that, Paul. As a matter of fact, I'll do that now with it fresh in mind, and then maybe add that to the, the intro or the outro of the show, and maybe the show notes as well, as I get to, because this will probably go up in a month or something like that, or whenever I think the books comes out in a few. Well, actually, the book's comes out in a couple of weeks, doesn't it? So
2 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
Where do you shop normally?
Well, I was going to say, that was actually a question. I'm just going to try to wrap up, but now not. Safeway. I'm going to go to a Safeway, and what would you?
With Safeway.
What's that?
We work with Safeway.
So I was going to ask, what would you guesstimate are the percentage of their products that are fair trade? And am I talking 5% are fair trade, or 50%, or, where is it?
No, it's small. It's small. But the good news is we're in every single aisle. And, what you can find at Safeway are, like national brands that are doing fair trade. Like Death Wish coffee is a great brand. That'll be high up on the shelf. Okay. But then Safeway has their own brand, right? Yeah. Here's the fair trade label. This is Safeway O Organics, and that's where Safeway does a lot of fair trade, in the O Organics line. So if you go to the coffee aisle, you're going to find fair trade coffee. If you go to the frozen section where they have frozen seafood, bro, you're going to find fair trade tuna. And by the way, it's the most delicious tuna steak I've ever eaten. It's line caught tuna from the Maldives, little fishermen, like with their, 1-man, 2-man boats going out and line catching 1 or 2 tuna a day. And that's what Safeway is selling. You'll find Nature Sweet fair trade tomatoes. You'll find fair trade certified products in a bunch of different aisles of Safeway. Now, Safeway is pretty mainstream, right? It's the third largest, Safeway Albertsons, I should say, is the third largest grocer in America after Walmart and Kroger. And, we're proud of that partnership. It's a small percentage of their total volume, but the more people that look for that Safeway O Organics fair trade organic product and buy it, the more they're going to do, right? And that
I do a decent amount of
Yeah.
the organic stuff. I can't remember which categories, but I'll look at that. Now I do have, now I know I'm in a small town in the mountains, but we do have we're big enough. We have a Walmart. So we do have there. Is there a higher percentage? About the only thing I do is grocery stuff there.
Yeah.
Or is around the same percentage of grocery items there?
No, it's probably less actually by percentage of total.
Okay.
But you'll find fair trade tomatoes at Walmart. You'll find fair trade chocolate at Walmart. Fair trade coffee and tea.
Okay.
Numi tea. Here, we got another product for you to see.
Yeah.
Numi tea.
Okay.
Label.
Yep.
Numi is one of our leading tea partners. They have incredible impact in India and other countries around the world. And you'll find Numi tea in pretty much every supermarket in America, from Walmart and Safeway to Whole Foods. So, here's the thing. You said earlier, wouldn't it be cool if there were like a fair trade section of the store? They tried that years ago with organics and it didn't work.
Oh, okay.
Most people don't shop for coffee in the organic section of the store. They don't shop for bananas in the organic section of the store. They buy bananas in the produce section.
Sure.
You
That
need to
makes
have
sense.
conventional and organics there. You need to have in the coffee aisle fair trade and non-fair trade, because you go to the coffee aisle for your coffee. So that's where you're going to find fair trade products pretty much in every aisle. Where
All right, here I got a selfish question. I need to buy some tea today. I'm about out. I buy loose leaf oolong tea and I usually buy it online because there's not really anything good in my town. Who should I go buy it from? Who's fair trade? Loose leaf oolong.
Well, I don't know if Numi has loose leaf. They have really high quality tea in bags.
Okay,
So
I'll look at it.
I would start there. And we do a little bit of work with Stash and Twinings. Again, look for the label on. But those are more mainstream brands, whereas loose leaf, you might have to go online to find a fair trade loose leaf.
I'll go play around with it. I'm going to go ahead and ask, since I got you here. The one other grocery store we have is City Market, which I think is a Kroger brand. You guys there?
Yeah, we work with Kroger for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we work with Kroger. So Kroger has a private label, their own brand called Simple Truth.
Mm-hmm.
And Simple Truth, have you noticed that brand in your store?
Sounds vaguely familiar. I don't shop there a whole lot.
So look for Simple Truth, because that tends to be the fair trade and organic product. And they've done Kroger. All these companies have made a great start, and so I'm filled with so much gratitude for the progress that we've made so far. But I'll tell you, brother, every time I go to the field, every time I go back to Nicaragua or to Ethiopia or to India, I'm just hit once again by how much more work we have to do. And so, my call to action for anyone listening to this is go buy fair trade products, because that's the signal that companies are looking for. If we buy more, they will give us more. And that's the only way to pick up the pace of change, is by showing them that, it's good for them. It's good for the companies as well as for farmers and workers. You
said the signal, and I got to admit, I was thinking at some point while we were doing this of the movie Hitchcock. You know that one? Hitchcock. It's okay. You got to check it. It's Will Smith. He plays a drunken superhero. My kids love it. Really meaningful movie. I think it's entertaining, but Jason Bateman plays a character that helps him, and Jason Bateman works, and he's trying to promote this brand to all these companies. And it's a red heart that signifies that they are helping humanity. So you're my Jason Bateman in the Hitchcock movie. It's a very similar story.
Come on, man. I want to be the drunk Superman.
Okay. That's kind of fun too. Fair enough.
Drunk superhero.
We got to get him drinking fair trade wine or whatever he drinks. Hey, thank you for what you do, Paul, what you've been doing for decades. And, I'm excited about the book coming out.
Yeah.
And it giving more exposure to fair trade and just helping us get educated and make what is obviously is a pretty simple choice. So I'll have to report to you also on my grocery trip, but I'll put that in the intro when we publish this, which I guess is just going to be a couple of weeks to come out with the book. So, man, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for taking the time to educate me and those who I get to share this with. Yeah,
Kevin, I just have to say this because I give so many interviews. I really appreciate your unique mix of head and heart.
Mm.
You know, you've brought such thoughtfulness and sensitivity to this conversation. I loved your questions. I loved kind of the arc of the conversation. Bro, can I be your friend?
I'd be honored to. This is
I want to hang out with you.
I'll tell you in all truth, Paul, I was sitting here thinking, because I so enjoyed your heart and mind in this, and thought I am probably missing out on, I do tend to focus so much on personal development and self-improvement and the next, therapist and professor, which I love, but this is kind of outside of that. And what a great benefit. I mean, the point is to uplift our own lives and others. And I'm probably, missing out. So, and I'm a fan. I would love to be connected, and maybe we should go on a tour. I should join you on your book tour and go around. I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
brother.
you.
Thank you. We could go on a tour. We could also go to Costa Rica and see the impact together. Wouldn't that be cool?
It would be, because the other thing, Paul, we're going to keep going here. Is I am a foodie. My kids just wonder why I don't become a chef. I love food. I love loving food, and I coffee, and I have a huge drinking problem. It's always, I'm either drinking my what is it, my water with the gosh, I forgot the electrolytes in it, or tea, loose leaf oolong tea, or coffee, or wine, or lately I've been playing with tequila a little bit too. But I want to matter with my purchases. Again, that's why you're here, because I've wondered, what am I doing and what am I buying? Am I paying attention? Well, now I can pay attention, but again, I really was struggling with the trust, and this will help. And yeah, I've got matter of fact, I've got what I'll call him my son in love, is what I call him. And he works for Boulder Food Rescue, and they feed the homeless. They transport food on bikes. He's going to love this story. And I think we are more and more. I do hear about people care about where their products come from. We can afford, people can afford a lot. And can I make my dollars matter? And am I hurting? I think that's, am I hurting anyone with my dollars? Nobody wants to do that. Maybe that's even a bigger sell than what I can help. So who am I don't want to hurt. So, hey, thanks.
Well,
let's keep going.
You've explored the world of self-help and the journey of enlightenment, as it were, and self-improvement. And one of the things that, I did in writing the book was I went and looked at the research on what I call the neuroscience of altruism, the neuroscience of doing good. Like, why do we care? Why do we care about farmers and workers around the world? Why do we care about the homeless? Why do you donate blood? Why do you go to a farmer's market, every once in a while instead of to Safeway, right? Like, what motivates these acts of kindness, these acts of compassion that we see in people of all demographic categories, people with money, people without money? We see acts of kindness. Why? I wanted to understand that because, arguably, when you buy organics, you're buying it because you want to be healthy. You want to protect yourself and your kids from, possibly getting cancer due to pesticides, right? So organics is intrinsically an act of self-protection, although the data suggests that people who buy organics are also very concerned about the environment, about, people. But why do people buy fair trade? I mean, on its face, it looks like buying fair trade is a way that I can help an Ethiopian coffee farmer that I'll never meet. Why would I do that? Why do I care? And so I wanted to double click on the psychology and the neuroscience of buying fair trade, of being kind, of being compassionate. And the data is really interesting, Kevin. There's so much data suggesting that when we show compassion, when we show kindness, there's a dopamine hit. We feel good. We feel good about ourselves. humans are intrinsically family and community oriented, right? That's how we survived, right? When from the times of saber-toothed tigers, we banded together, right? To survive. And we want to feel like we're part of a community. We want to feel like we're part of a greater good. And so when we do things like buying fair trade, there's a feeling of goodness. There's a feel good factor, which is, you could say, selfish, right? Not in a bad sense. It's a good thing to feel good about yourself because you donated blood or dropped $1 in a homeless person's cup or bought fair trade. And so there's something very deep in all of us which motivates our acts of kindness, which motivates our compassion for others. And so what I see is an opportunity to tap into that desire that people have to do good. And fair trade is one way to do that, right? And there's so many ways to do it, but fair trade is trying to tap into that desire that each of us has, not only to not do harm in the world, but to feel good about the impact of our choices.
It makes me think about just, we want to contribute, we want to, I work with a lot of people who just want to find purpose in their work or in their business because they want to feel like it matters. That I see a lot of, I have a lot of peers who are guys that have made a lot of money selling a widget and they're trying to figure out, they want to contribute, they want to matter. And to your point too, boy, one of my early shows was with, I don't know how she labels herself, some doctorate, but maybe a social behavioral researcher or whatever. Shanti Feldhahn is her name. She wrote a book called The 30-Day Kindness Challenge, but it was her focus and study on kindness. I had her on the show because the message I got out was kindness. Why be kind? Well, because it's nice to other people and hopefully I'll get some reciprocity. And she says, no, the research shows the biggest benefit to being kind is just you. You being kind makes you feel better. Yes. If you get no reciprocity, if nothing comes of it, if the person doesn't even receive it, it's you feel better. And man, that hit me because I think we are selfish, but it's I guess as Anthony DeMello would say, it's a higher evolved selfishness.
Right.
So
right.
I'll take that.
What's Shanti's last name?
Feldhahn, Feldhahn, I think. And when we're done recording here, I'll look, her book's on my shelf back here. I actually have her, her personal, I either have her cell number or her email.
I want to watch that podcast. It sounds amazing. And I want to read her stuff because it sounds I
love the research. Yeah. I've done you on that. I wrote that down. You said, the neuroscience of altruism. I even like that as a title. That's great. Maybe that's your next book.
Maybe.
All right, man. I'll look at this when we quit recording. Man, Paul, thank you. What a gift. And, I would be honored to keep the conversation and the friendship going.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us in this conversation. And again, it's Paul Rice, founder of Fair Trade. The book that I hit different points on is Every Purchase Matters: How Fair Trade Farmers, Companies, and Consumers Are Changing the World. Though again, as you heard, very simply stated, go to the grocery store, look at the products you're going to buy, and check to see if you can find some that have that fair trade stamp on them. That's actually where I'm headed right now after I finish this recording. Got a question or comment for me or for Paul? I've got his direct email and cell number. I can get it to him. I've had multiple people in the past weeks connect with me asking questions, some of them the questions I got to my guests to answer. So we can literally get that to happen. You can just email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Well, hey, until next time, here's to the evolving you.
Yeah.